can get the images quite clear, as a matter of fact. All of you who are at home, I'm looking at you right now. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jashoranandana Brajajana Ranjana Jashoranandana Brajajana Ranjana Jamunadira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Nitai Gaura Premananda Hari Hari Bo Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Yasan Tato Jayam Udirayat Nasta Presha Badreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama-shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki We're going to be reading today from the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, text number 62 and 63 this morning. So I invite you to read along with me. Do you have your smartphones available? Or if you're at home, you have your books available? Srimad Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2. Contents of the Gita summarized, and text number 62 and 63. We're going to be talking about getting mad this morning and how to control one's anger. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jashoranandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Nitai Gaura Premananda. Hari Hari Bol. So we'll begin by reading text number 62 of chapter 2 in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Let's do word for word. Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsa Sangas Tasyu Pajayate Teshu Pajayate Sangat Sanjayate Kama Kamat Krodho Abhijayate Dhyayato Vishayan Pumsa Sangaseshu Pajayate Sangat Sanjayate Kama Kamat Krodho Bijayate. Word for word translations. Dhyayato, while contemplating. Vishayan, sense objects. Pumsa, of a person. Sangha, attachment. Teshu, in the sense objects. Upajayate, develops. Sangat, from attachment. Sanjayate, develops. Kama, desire. Kamat, from desire. Krodha, anger. Abhijayate, becomes manifest. Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. While contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them, and from such attachment lust develops, and from lust anger arises. Let's read the purport here by Srila Prabhupada. One who is not Krishna conscious is subjected to material desires while contemplating the objects of the senses. The senses require real engagements, and if they are not engaged in transcendental loving service of the Lord, they will certainly seek engagement in the service of materialism. Now I'm going to skip over, and we're going to go to text number 263. That's chapter 2, text number 63. So repeat with me again. Krodhad bhavati samota samoha samohat. That's two different words, by the way, for those of you listening in. Smriti Vibrama Smriti Brahmshad Buddhi Nasu Buddhi Nasyat Pranasyati. Translation by His Divine Grace. From anger, complete delusion arises, and from delusion, bewilderment of memory. And when memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost. And when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. All right, and I will not read the purport there, because I want to get directly into talking about dealing with one's anger. I should first of all offer obeisances to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishnapadaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravati Pacharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Pastyatya Deshatarine. And to my own spiritual master, Nama Om Vishnapadaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Tamal Krishna Gosamiti Namane. So whenever we are encountering a problem of any kind, then it's good to know what is the cause of the problem. So what are some of the causes of anger? According to what we have just been reading, becoming attached to objects of the senses is one of the causes of our becoming angry. Because you have heard it said that in this material world there are three causes, primary causes of lamentation or feeling sorrowful. One is for wanting something that we do not have and wanting it very badly and struggling and trying really hard to get it, and yet we cannot get it. Therefore, we lament. Another is wanting something and going after it and trying really hard, putting out the effort, working hard, saving money to obtain it, and giving our time and energy. And we get it, and we're so happy. And then it turns out not to be quite as good as we thought it would be. So we lament. We are sorrowful. The third cause of lamentation is wanting something really bad, desiring to have it, going out and working and saving money and scraping, and finally we get it, and it's exactly as good as we thought it would be. And then we lose it. It goes away. And this happens not only with material possessions, but also with relationships, does it not? Same thing. We want to be with someone really bad, can't, and therefore we lament. Or we want it really bad to be with someone, and we struggle, and yet we get it, and then it turns out not to be as good as it was, and we lament. So that's the way relationships go, isn't it? So we find a lot in this society that we're in now. People are having to work very hard just to maintain themselves, to put a roof over their heads. But quite often the roof over their heads is not exactly the same as their parents or their grandparents experienced, in which, you built a house, for example, and you moved into it, and it was simple, but it was adequate, and you stayed there for most of your life. And nowadays, what do? We have to hire someone to come in and meet all kinds of rules and regulations, pay very high prices for materials, pay high prices for labor, and we get ourselves something that is just about what we wanted. And then we look at the mortgage, and it says 30 years. So we cannot pay a house off in 5 or 10 years as our parents or our grandparents could. Maybe they didn't even have to go into debt for that long. Seems like I remember my parents when they moved back to the community in which my mother was growing up. They had someone come and build a house, and this was back in the early 1950s, 1954, 55. And I think my father had sold his previous house for a great profit. He got $5,000 for that house. And he took that and he added some more to it and wound up spending about $10,000 for his second house. Unheard of, right? Even as recently as my wife and I first came to this community, we bought the first house that was purchased by devotees on Perry Avenue, just 1 block away from here, and we paid a roasting price of $18,000 for that house. Of course, it was a house that was probably built in the 30s or 40s, I'm guessing. Whereas the house that I'm in now was built in 1918. So it's 107 years old or something like that now. And we were very fortunate. We were able to pay off our house in about 15 years. And that took quite a bit of scrapping and scrambling for money at that time, but we got it. So anyhow, what people have to pay for is quite exorbitant nowadays. I'm hearing that we used to buy houses. The temple bought several houses at one time when the community was being reestablished in 1978, 79, 80, and there were a lot of these houses around here that were just rental properties, and they were really, really bad. I've told you about that before. And we paid as little as $6,000 for one of those little houses that was here in the community. Right over is actually where our parking lot is now in the back. Only maybe 10,000. And then when we finally had to pay a price of like 20,000 for a house a little bit later on, several years later, 20,000, that seemed like such an exorbitant price to have to pay for a house after having paid so low. Of course, the houses were in very bad condition, and nobody in his right mind would move into it. But this is the place where Radha and Kalachandji chose to come and sit down or stand up. And therefore, we didn't realize that it was really a boon to be in this particular part of town. But it turned out to be because we bought a lot of properties, and individuals such as myself. We bought properties around here for a price that's unbelievably low nowadays. So we get these possessions. And sometimes because of the high prices and because of losing jobs and such, then we lose those possessions and our opulences, and we no longer have the position in society. Sometimes our family walks away from us because we no longer had access to the money that we once had, and therefore we lament. And then quite often we'll become angry and wondering, why is this happening to me? I've always been a good person. I've kept the status quo of the community and of my family, and I've done what I could. But things just sometimes do not work out as we hope they would. All right, then there's there are other reasons for becoming angry, and one of those is being fussed at by someone. Maybe someone accuses us of something that we really didn't do. In other words, it's a false accusation. But for some reason, they believe that we committed some offense that was not really our intention. And what happens? Then we get angry about that, don't we? Because we don't feel that we were being justly treated. And so therefore, we feel that we are just angry because we're not being treated fairly. And this happens not unusually. This is not just a rare occurrence. This happens especially when we're living in a community like this, which is very close. You get to know a lot of people, and especially when we first came in 1979, 1980, we were meeting people from other parts of the country, other parts of the world. And because we were living in such a tight community, and we had as our leader someone that we loved a lot and cared a lot about, and he was a good leader, But still, there are times when anger would flare. And people, even back here in the Pujari room, there was sometimes when you would hear two people yelling at each other. You could hear them here in the temple room. They'd just get angry in the Pujari room, which is strange, isn't it? But that sort of thing does happen. And it's usually because someone is misunderstood or someone misunderstands another person. And so what to do? It just goes. So these are some things that make us angry. You know, either our possessions, what we desire to possess, or our what we possess at one time and lose, it goes away, and then there are people that become angry, and we've seen people leave the community because they simply could not get along with other people. And they would blame other people for the things that happened to them. And if someone got angry at you and was shouting in your face, you know, you feel that that person it has no good reason for treating me that way. So there are ways to maintain one's anger. Sometimes we, even though we gain something and then lose it, it is really not just chance that by chance that this happens. There is a reason for that. And we learn that early on in our devotional lives. At least we learn it but with our intelligence. But when it comes to applying it, it's a lot more difficult. And what I'm talking about is reactions to our past activities. It is said, and I think I've come to the realization that it is true, that the person who is making you feel bad, or the person that is mistreating you in some way, is not the person who is responsible for your suffering. Who is? We have one finger pointed at another person, and we've got 5 fingers pointed back toward ourselves, don't we? It is really we who are the cause of the suffering that we have to go to go through when another person is really berating us and really acting angry toward us. It is really us. But we quite often, when we're in the midst of it, you know, when we're embroiled in a disturbance like that, the easiest thing for us to do is to just let the anger boil up inside and then come out of our mouths at the other person, isn't it? That's the way it happens, because we're thinking that I'm not the one that was the cause of that. You know, we have the Vedic literatures, which are so nice because they're not full of good fortune for everyone. It's not like, and they lived happily ever after. No, there are so many occasions, and one of my favorite pieces of literature is the Mahabharata, because there's so many examples of how really saintly persons are having to go through a time of difficulty in their lives, and there just seems to be no good reason for it except that someone else is envious. And we see that. We saw that with Duryodhana and his brothers. They were very angry and envious of the Pandavas. Pandavas were brought up, 5 young boys brought up out in the mountains with their father and their 2 mothers. And the father dies untimely, and one of the mothers follows the father into death. And the other mother is left to raise the kids, and they come back to the big city of Hastinapur. And so we find that their cousins are there, and they've been living there all their lives. And their father, even though he's not suited to become the king, he has been taking the position of the king in the king's absence. Pandu was the king. And we find that the blind king, Dhritarashtra, had taken over. And, you know, now that his nephews have come back, he's not really so ready to give up the control of the kingdom to his brother's boys. And so he wants them for himself. And so we see that the Kauravas, Duryodhana and his brothers, they tried all kinds of things to get rid of their cousins, even tried to kill them in a number of ways, made life very unpleasant for them, and were using the kingdom that was based in Hastinapur as though it were their very own, and they were entitled to it. And so we see that the Pandavas had to go through so many difficulties. In particular, when it was decided, and Dhritarashtra became convinced by his elders, the persons who were influencing him, that he really should divide the kingdom up. Well, he did so, and he gave his five nephews then a piece of land that was absolutely worthless. It was just desert. And because Krishna was the friend of the Pandavas, he came and looked at the land with Yudhisthira and his brothers, and he said, looks like your uncle has been very generous to you. And so he calls for King Indra, who is responsible for control of the rain, and Indra brings the rain and makes the whole area that they've been given lush, full of growing plants and beautiful. Krishna calls in an architect, and within a short period of time, there's beautiful, beautiful castles there, a beautiful place for Pandava and his, not Pandava, but Yudhisthira and his brothers and their families to live. And it was just marvelous the way it was constructed, brilliant construction. So Duryodhana gets interested to see what kind of place this is that his cousins have inherited. He goes to look. And as he's going through and noticing the beautiful wonders of that palatial building, he mistakes water from land, and he falls in and gets wet, and all of the queens there laugh at him. And Yudhisthira quickly indicates that they should stop laughing, but Krishna says, no, let them laugh. Because he knew the envious nature of Duryodhana, and he wanted this thing to be brought to head, because as long as Duryodhana was around, there was going to be trouble and strife for the Pandavas. So they had this beautiful place to live that was removed, but still Duryodhana and his brothers were very envious of their cousins. And so they proposed a gambling match, which you remember. And all of these people were there at the gambling match. Yudhisthira felt that it was a bad idea, because he said there's nothing good that comes of gambling. It's really evil. And he was right, but Duryodhana had his uncle, I believe, who was that? Shakuni. Yes, Shakuni. He came, and he was very familiar with casting dice, and he was tricky. He knew some tricks. And so he won for Duryodhana all of the possessions of the Pandavas, the land, the temple, the house that they lived in, the castles. And so Yudhisthira eventually put up his brothers as the wager, and eventually himself and his wife, and he lost everything. And so they were very morose about that. But in that gathering where all of the elders of the area came to watch, they watched as someone tried to disrobe the Queen Draupadi. And no one spoke up in her favor. Not Bhishma Dev, not Dronacharya, not Dhritarashtra. Nobody spoke up for her. They just let this evil person try to strip her naked. And so we're talking about anger now, how to control anger. And so Bhima was the most powerful person there. And he wanted just to rip the Kauravas to shreds for dishonoring their wife and therefore dishonoring them in such a way as was being done. But Yudhisthira, being a very godly person and very dutiful, he said, no, this is not the time, Bhima. And later on they discussed it and said, now is not the time to attack our cousins because they have all the advantages. They've got allies. And so therefore we cannot. But here's Bhima. He was a practically uncontrollable anger. And when they eventually left after the burning of the house of Lac, in which they were invited to come and enjoy some time, and this was all put on by their cousins, the Kauravas, as well. But when they went out, escaped from the fire, crossed the river, and all of the brothers and the mother, Kunti, at that time, were holding on to Bhima, to different parts of his body. He was such a huge person. He was the son of the wind god, just as Hanuman was. And so he was very, very powerful. So he ran for quite some distance, and with the running, it was said that the movement of his thighs while he was running tore trees down. He was so powerful. And eventually they got to a place where they had to stop and rest. Everybody was tired. They were practically swooning from having to hang on to Bhima at that time because he was moving so fast, and everybody was just barely hanging on. So eventually they got to a place, and then Bhima was he was indefatigable. In other words, he didn't tire. He had plenty of energy left. So he took the duty of watching over his mother and his brothers as they slept on the bare ground. And he became still angrier at those who had brought all this on them. So these are some things that were, and there were other instances that were that were recorded in the Mahabharata and in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Great saintly people being taken advantage of by evil people. So we have to, to be able to reason this thing, we have to understand why this is being dishonored, why people are being dishonored like that. And for a lot of us, we said that we're just getting reactions. Well, we know that the Pandavas were very godly people, so there was some other reason for that. As a matter of fact, Krishna permitted these things to happen. He is the supreme controller. He could have kept them from happening, but he did not keep them from happening. And even as super soul, he was in the hearts of those persons who were giving a hard time to the Pandavas and encouraging them to do what they were doing. So he wanted to do several things. Krishna can make many things happen at one time. He is so powerful. And so I think back to another history, and that is a biblical history in which the Jewish people were being held captive by the Pharaoh of Egypt. And it was said in the Old Testament of the Bible that God hardened his heart so that he would not let the people go. And I was thinking, this is really strange. And so I'm thinking, this is also strange. Krishna, he's within the heart of Duryodhana, within the heart of Dhritarashtra, all those persons who are inimical to the Pandavas. Why doesn't he tell them as super soul that you should not be treating these godly cousins of yours in this very heinous way? You should be treating them with dignity and respect. But apparently he did not. Or he tried to, and they chose not to listen to Antaryami, Super Soul within their own hearts. And so as a result of that, then Krishna allowed the Pandavas to be put to many tests. And there was another reason, to increase their humility. Because we see that whenever a person loses everything, that's an opportunity to be humble. And whenever someone is causing you to be angry, that's another time that you can stop and think, this is happening to me either because I've done something really bad in the past or because Krishna is trying to teach me something, or both. I've done something bad in the past. He's given me an opportunity to burn away those karmic reactions, and he's also using this as a means of helping me understand that I'm not a very humble person, that I think I should be getting respect from other people. People should be doing things nice for me. People should be wanting to serve me because I'm such a wonderful person. No, so if we have that kind of, and we do have that kind of attitude, it might not be quite as out front as I'm describing, but somewhere in the back of our minds, in our hearts, there's something that Krishna wants us to get rid of, because until we do, there's no possibility of going back to the spiritual world. Again, going back to another spiritual person, Jesus Christ. You know, he said at one time, unless one becomes as a little child, he cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. Do you remember that? Have you heard? Of course, all of you have not had the kind of the Judeo-biblical Christian instructions, but some of us have. And we've heard this before. So there's a reason then that Krishna allows us to have to go through a period of sacrifice in our lives. And it may be a personal illness that comes on us. You know, cancer is just rampant nowadays, and other diseases such as the COVID that we endured just a couple, 3 years ago. Those were difficulties that Krishna could have prevented easily if he had wanted to. And if we look at the people who suffered during the time that those things, and what to speak of COVID and what to speak of cancer, we suffered through 2 world wars in this past century. Some of us lived, sometime during that time period, and we've learned about it in our school too. How there were people on the planet who were wanting to rule the entire planet and considered the wealth, all of theirs, at their disposal. And so we can understand then that Krishna is giving them all the facility they need to get into that position of trying to rule the world. And because they're just bad people. But still, Krishna facilitates that. So you say, well, what about all those innocent people who had to die? 6 million persons of the Jewish faith had to give up their lives. And what to speak of the Jews, even so many Russian people had to die. If you look at, you can go on Google to find out how many people died during the 2 world wars that we went through. And you'll find out also in studying history that goes back even farther that the war for independence of this country from England was a cause of that. And coming after that, then there was civil strife within our own society in the mid to late 1800s. And that was called the Great Civil War of the United States. There were more Americans killed in that war than in all the other world wars combined. Did you know that? That's amazing. Brothers killing brothers. People from the north killing people from the south and vice versa. and all for something that was going to be going away before long anyhow, and that was slavery, because we were just entering the machine era, and machines were a lot easier and a lot cheaper than to maintain than human beings who were being kept as slaves. So you could do, one person can use a machine to do the work that maybe 20, 30, 40 slaves could do out in the field at one time. So that era was going away, but still Krishna permitted it to happen. What about all those so-called innocent people then that had to suffer for that? Well, we understand that if you come into this material world, unless you're a very holy person and you choose to come in to help deliver everyone else, you come because you have to come, because you have reactions that bring you back into this material world. And so as a result of that, then so many people have had to come and give up their lives throughout the history books. If you look and see how many, like the people of Israel being imprisoned by the Egyptians and forced to work like animals and very difficult circumstances. And then now, even now today, we get the same kind of thing going on over in the Eastern European countries. That once again, you got somebody that was like Hitler. He wants to have the property belong to his country, even though he knows he's getting close to the time of his death. Still, he wants that to be his legacy, that I increase the size of my country's holdings. I want to be remembered in all the books, the history books of my country and of the entire world. What a great person, a great military, political leader I was. And so all of these other people who have to be the one, the soldiers from the United States and from other countries that gave up their lives during that time period to keep that person from ruling the entire world, then they had to suffer. And what to speak of the soldiers themselves, they had families left behind who had to suffer as well. So very difficult times that are being permitted by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And those persons whom we call innocent people, they're not really innocent. They came into this material world for a reason. They have been here many lifetimes before. They committed sinful activities. There had to be a way for them to get cleansed of those activities. So the results of continuing of anger is that they cause us then not to be associated with godly people. That's one of the results that comes from being angry. If you cannot, and I've seen it in this community, and I've probably been part of it myself, the source of it myself, and also the recipient of that anger. That you cannot continue to be in the association of saintly people if you permit yourself to exercise anger and to try to defame someone else, criticize them unjustly or even justly. We can say it's justly because we think that maybe they deserved this blasting that I'm giving them. But we don't think that way about ourselves, do we? We think that we are the ones that are being mistreated. So this anger thing, it's really bad because it also prevents us from showing love and compassion for other people. If someone becomes really angry at us and begins blasting us, then sometimes if we allow ourselves to become angry also, then it is very hard for us to remember that we should love this person, that this person is going through difficult times because of something that has happened in the past, something that has happened at the present. And so we should be compassionate toward that person, just like our spiritual master has been toward us, just like other people in this community have shown us love and compassion and they've been our friends, even though we weren't necessarily looking for friends. We found friends here in this community. So if we don't have the association of godly people, and we make ourselves to be unattractive, then that means that we will not be successful attracting other people to Krishna consciousness. And this is something that our spiritual masters want to do. They became attractive themselves to us because they had love and compassion for us. And so we can do the same thing, and in doing so, we can please our spiritual master. We can please those persons who are giving their lives for administrating this community, helping out with different programs. And so then we can receive the benefit of controlling our anger and instead replacing that with love and concern. I heard, and I've mentioned this before, I heard our former temple president, Nityananda Prabhu, say one time, I was talking with him back here in the Pujari room, and we were talking about someone who had made some comments about him that were not so nice. And so, I was feeling very defensive for him, but he was saying, whenever somebody accuses him of something or blames him for something, he says, I immediately feel happy. And I was thinking to myself, how can you feel happy when somebody is trying to make you feel bad? And he says, because I know that something good is about to come. And if we can make it through these difficult times and realize that the difficulty has come to us because of our own activities in the past, because of the way that we're treating people in the future, if we can make it through that time, we also might come to another stage of our lives where things are absolutely pleasant. We have enough means to get by, economic means, financial means to get by. We've somehow or other, those of us who are older, been able to watch our children leave home and become successful in their material lives and in their family lives. And so it's just, we are experiencing a time that is quite pleasant. And somehow or other, we probably are thinking, as I am, that, well, I deserved it. I went through all that difficult time, and now I'm at a place now where I'm getting what I really deserve. I'm getting a peaceful life here toward the end of my stay on the planet. But it's not really us who is responsible. We look around us, and quite often my wife and I, we correspond with friends that we've known in the past when we were growing up, and we hear about their suffering, then we realize I'm just really, really lucky. And what does lucky mean? Means that I have received the benediction of the goddess of fortune, that she is showing kindness to me, and she's the representative of the Supreme Lord. So the divine couple then are the ones who are responsible for giving us a time of reprieve or respite from the difficulties that we knew when we were growing up, paying bills and taking care of kids and having sicknesses and all this sort of thing. So we feel ourselves to be very fortunate. So it's to our spiritual masters and it's to the members of our community that what more can we say than Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. All glories to the Vaishnava associates of the Lord. Hare Krishna. We're past time now for ending, so I'm going to ask you, if you have comments, please let me know afterward, and I would be very happy to hear them from you. So I thank you all for being with me today and making this a very pleasant time of the week Even though I'm scared when I know that I have to give a class, I get all nervous and upset and don't sleep well. But still, it's such a pleasant thing to have your association. Those of you who are listening in online feel the same way about you all. Thank you very much for coming in and being with us today. And we will offer our respectful obeisances unto Srila Prabhupada, who is a divine personality who has given us the knowledge, given us this opportunity. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nivishesha Shinibadi Prasthatu Deshatani. All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, all glories to Shri Radha Kalachandjidam. Hare Krishna.